You've got 24 hours, ma'am, or we tow it." That was the first sentence out of the man's mouth. No greeting, no introduction. Just that flat, smug tone you've heard 1,000 times from people who think they own a slice of power they didn't earn. He wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky, held a clipboard like it was a badge of honor, and stood there, right on the gravel outside my ranch gate, like he had some God-given right to tell me what to do on my own land. Beside him stood another guy, built like a truck stop linebacker in an orange vest labeled HOA enforcement, arms crossed and chin up like we were about to square off in a showdown at high noon. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life, my land, my damn driveway. Now before I go any further, let me ask you something, man to man. Have you ever looked someone dead in the eye, knowing they had no business being on your property, no right to speak with that tone, and felt that old heat rise up from your gut? The kind that doesn't roar, but simmers like coals under a cast iron skillet? That was me right then. And I know some of you reading this, especially if you've worked land, served time in uniform, or raised a family on dirt that you bled to keep, you'll get it without me explaining a damn thing. Here's the thing. I don't live in some HOA-covered suburb with lemon-scented garbage bins and matching mailbox paint. I live on a working ranch, Matthews Family Ranch. We're 6 miles outside of Willow Ridge Estates, the subdivision that sprouted up 3 years ago like mold after a flood. Gated, groomed, pristine, sterile. And now apparently they think their rules grow tall enough. When I walked out that morning, I was loading hay into the barn. The tractor was parked beside the east fence, where it always is when I'm working that section of the field. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel and figured it was a delivery truck or maybe my brother dropping by with a bucket of fence nails. Instead, I saw a white pickup. Clean. Too clean for this part of the county. The kind of truck you buy to make a statement, not to haul feed or fix a fence line. And then I saw the men. Clipboard guy in muscle vest. They stood at my gate like officers. Like enforcers. But make no mistake, these weren't lawmen. They were HOA volunteers. That's right. Volunteers. Civilians with self-appointed authority and a rule book designed for manicured sidewalks and plastic flamingo disputes. And yet, here they were, talking about towing a piece of farm equipment off my property. "This is private ranch land," I told them, calm but sharp. "You're not in your jurisdiction. You passed a no trespassing sign a quarter-mile back. I'm not part of your HOA." But Clipboard didn't blink. He just tapped the back of his pen on his paper, like he was making a note on a checklist. "We've received complaints," he said. "Your tractor is an eyesore to nearby homeowners. Regulation 14B states," I cut him off. "Regulation 14B doesn't mean a damn thing out here. This isn't residential land. You're off the map." But he just nodded like I was a child misunderstanding bedtime rules. That's when I felt something shift in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, older. A kind of rooted defiance that comes from knowing this land better than you know your own reflection. From burying dogs here. From raising children here. From watching your husband's ashes settle into the same soil you plant with your hands. "You threatening to tow my tractor?" I asked. That question, posed with the flat edge of composure, hit different. Clipboard's smirk faltered. A half-second pause. Then he nodded. "We will initiate towing in 24 hours if the vehicle is not moved." I could have screamed. I could have unleashed the weight of 6 years of widowhood, of endless chores, of keeping this place afloat with duct tape and prayer. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside, looked over my shoulder, and said the words that flipped the entire damn story. "Then I suggest you tell that to my brother." The sound of tires crunching behind them told me he was already here. Greg pulled up in a black SUV, stepped out with quiet precision, and adjusted the badge on his chest like he wasn't just my brother. He was a United States Marshal. Now, I need to back up a bit. You deserve the whole picture. My name's Claire Matthews. I'm 41. I've run this ranch since my husband James passed 6 years ago. Cancer took him slow. Too slow to save him, too fast to prepare. Since then, it's just been me, my 2 kids, Joey and Maddie, and a few good horses, cows, and dogs that love me better than most men I've known. Greg visits when he can, always with a truck bed full of tools and advice. He's not just kin. He's backbone. This wasn't the first time Willow Ridge HOA tried to stretch its fingers past the edge of their fences. They once sent a letter saying my front lawn was overgrown. It was a cow pasture. Another time, they claimed my mailbox was the wrong shade of brown. I don't have a mailbox. We don't get mail delivered out here. But I let it go. I figured they were harmless, bored retirees who got high on community guidelines and flagpole etiquette. I was wrong. See, that morning, before they threatened to tow anything, there was already tension in the air. A pickup had parked across from my property line 2 days earlier. 2 men inside. Watching. Writing. I waved once. They didn't wave back. That's when I found the paper shoved into the corral gate. Notice of violation. Unauthorized industrial vehicle. No signature. No contact info. Just threats typed in Times New Roman like it was a ransom note. I laughed at first. But something told me not to. Because these weren't just rule sticklers. They were trespassers with a mission. They were trying to make an example. And I was the kind of woman they underestimated. A woman who's been underestimated her whole damn life. So when they showed up again the next morning, I didn't just grab my jacket, I grabbed my phone. I hit record, and I walked out to meet them with my chin up and my boots planted like stakes. That's when the showdown began. That's when Clipboard, or Officer Dale as he introduced himself like we were in a John Wayne film, said something that still makes my blood boil. HOA jurisdiction extends beyond the physical map for visibility and aesthetic compliance. That's HOA language for, we made this up and we're hoping you buy it. I didn't. And when Greg stepped out of that black SUV, full uniform, calm and cold as a northern river, they realized they'd picked the wrong woman. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just looked at them and said, "You are trespassing. This property is not under your authority, and you're threatening to remove private equipment without a legal warrant." Dale tried to argue. Greg held up a finger, just one, and said, "You finish that sentence, I put you in cuffs." They left that day, but not before Dale spat out something like, "You think you're above the rules." And maybe I am, Dale. Not above the rules, but above your kind of rule. The kind that's written by people in plastic chairs, drunk on petty power, forgetting that this country wasn't built by committees. It was built by people with calloused hands and quiet resolve. That's the truth I need you to hold on to, friend. Especially you, the man reading this who knows what it's like to work land, to fix things that break, to feel the weight of responsibility heavier than the sacks of feed you hoist onto your shoulders. They think we're relics, but we are the root system. We are the spine. They came to take a tractor, but what they really tried to steal was something bigger, sovereignty, pride. And if you don't think they'll come for yours next, you haven't been paying attention. Because this story isn't just about me. It's about every man and woman who's looked out over their porch at land they fought to keep, only to see strangers with clipboards measuring the soil like it's theirs. So I stood my ground. That day, and every day after. Because this land, it doesn't answer to HOA bylaws. It answers to blood, grit, and the simple truth that no one, not Dale, not his vest-wearing goon, not some plastic board behind iron gates, gets to rewrite my life with a fine print footnote. Not now. Not ever. It was the kind of morning that used to feel safe. Cool breeze over alfalfa, the soft creak of the barn door, and the low, comforting purr of my old John Deere waking up like it always had, grumbling a little, but ready to work. I had coffee in hand, boots still damp from dew, and a task list too long to get fancy with. Just another day on the Matthews Ranch. That is, until I saw the white pickup again. Same polished shine. Same empty county plates. Same 2 figures inside. But this time they weren't watching. They were waiting. They didn't even flinch when I stepped out onto the porch. No shame. No sense of boundaries. Just sat there like the world owed them a piece of every inch it touched. I stood there a second longer than I usually would. Maybe to see if they'd blink first. Maybe just to remind myself I wasn't imagining this whole thing. Then I took a slow breath, turned my back on them, and went to work. But something inside me, some old instinct, like the one you get when a storm's coming, was already tightening in my chest. I figured they'd do what cowards do, leave when no one gave them attention. But instead, by midday Joey, my 15-year-old, came running in from the gate, out of breath and eyes wide. "Mom, they're walking around the barn. They've got a camera." That got me moving. Fast. I snatched my phone, hit record before I even cleared the porch steps, and marched down the drive with fire in my gut and purpose in every step. They weren't at the gate anymore. They were on my property, strolling like tourists through a roadside attraction. Clipboard in one hand, camera in the other. One of them, Dale, the same puffed-up HOA enforcer with a smirk you could smell from a mile away, had his phone out, snapping shots of my equipment, the barn, even the fence. His buddy was scribbling notes like we were under inspection for a health code I never signed up for. I raised my voice, loud and steady. You are trespassing on private land. Back off now. They stopped and looked up like I was the one out of place. Dale didn't lower his phone. He said matter-of-factly, your property violates visual compliance standards. The tractor is visible from Willow Ridge. That constitutes a disruption. I took another step toward them. You're not the law. You have no jurisdiction here. You're in violation, not me. He smirked again. That smug little twitch at the edge of his mouth that always comes right before someone says something dumb. Our HOA extends visual impact rights to adjacent properties. Adjacent? Try 6 damn miles across dry brush and a ridgeline. I pointed to the sign they passed on their way in. That road says private. It's not just a courtesy. It's a warning. And you two just walked past it like you own the place. That's when Dale reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Here's the notice. You've got 24 hours. I didn't take it. I didn't even glance at it. You're not putting your bootleg paperwork on my barn. You want to cite someone, try your own board first. You've got zero claim to anything on this land. They left, eventually, but not with their tails tucked. More like cats marking territory, convinced they had the upper hand. And maybe that's what got to me most. That quiet arrogance. The kind that doesn't shout, it infects. Like mold under paint. You don't see it until it's eating through the whole damn wall. Later that night, when things should have been calm, kids inside, dogs fed, the wind just starting to cool the ground, I found a notice folded under a river rock on my front step. Different from the last. It wasn't just a printout. It was stamped, signed, and included a time and date for towing. 6:45 a.m. Wednesday morning. That gave me less than 2 days. I called Greg immediately. Told him everything. The photos, the intrusion, the new order. He didn't say much. Just, I'll handle it. Be ready. That meant more coming from him than any sheriff or court order ever could. He'd seen things I hadn't. Done things most people couldn't carry. And when he said handle it, it meant someone was about to learn a lesson in boundaries they wouldn't soon forget. I tried to sleep that night, but it felt like the wind never stopped whispering. Every creak of wood, every distant coyote made me sit up. I was still awake when I heard the low rumble. Not thunder. Not a tractor. Bigger. Deeper. 2 tow trucks, red and angry looking, crawled down my dirt road like beasts hunting in a pack. Behind them, a white SUV. No markings. Just tinted windows and a purpose. I stood on my porch, coffee cup forgotten in my hand, and watched as they rolled past the no trespassing sign. Not one of them hesitated. Like they'd already written the ending to this story. Like they believed I'd fold. The lead driver stepped out, sunglasses on despite the darkness, and said with a polite nod, "Evening, ma'am. We're here to collect a green John Deere, per HOA directive." I didn't yell. Didn't cuss. I didn't need to. I simply stepped down the stairs and said, "Touch that machine and you'll be answering to a federal marshal." He scratched his head. "We've got paperwork, ma'am." Then came the kicker. He pulled out a form with Dale Henderson's signature at the bottom. No judge. No sheriff. No court seal. Just the word authorization in bold black letters like that was supposed to mean something. I was dialing Greg when the SUV door opened. Out stepped Dale, dressed like some pretend official, flanked by a woman in a suit too tight for comfort and confidence that didn't match her jurisdiction. "Ms. Matthews," she smiled, all sugar and superiority. "You've been notified under Visual Compliance Article 7. Your tractor remains visible from Willow Ridge. This disruption," I cut her off. "This isn't your land, and it never will be." Dale started toward the barn. That's when headlights swept the field, blue and red flashing like salvation. Greg pulled in behind them, sheriff's cruiser just seconds after. I can still hear the crunch of gravel under Greg's boots as he stepped out, uniform crisp, voice steady. Back away from the equipment. And then silence. No one moved. Even the woman with the binder seemed smaller under that badge. Dale started his argument, but Greg didn't let him finish. "What you're doing here is unauthorized seizure of private property. You've entered private land without warrant or cause. This isn't civil anymore. It's criminal." The sheriff inspected the documents and shook his head. "No county seal. No court approval. This isn't worth the paper it's printed on." You'd think that would have ended it. That they'd have driven off with their tail between their legs like a pack of mongrels caught in a henhouse. But no, that's not how people like this operate. See, when someone's chasing power they didn't earn, the law doesn't stop them. It just slows them down. That night, when things finally quieted, I thought we were safe. But the next morning, the barn door was wide open. and my tractor was gone. Not a trace. No broken boards. Just tire tracks. Clean. Intentional. Professional. Whoever took it didn't just steal a machine. They stole history. Blood. Sweat. My husband's handprints still lived in the steel of that frame. Joey used to ride with me on weekends, his laughter echoing off the hay bales. And now it was gone. Greg arrived in minutes. He didn't knock. He moved like a soldier, not because he was afraid, but because he was angry. Real angry. Not the kind you show. The kind you act on. He crouched, examined the tracks, then looked at me. They didn't tow it. They lifted it. Straight line exit. Coordinated. I felt something collapse in my chest, something heavier than rage. Grief. Not for the tractor, but for what it meant. What they were willing to do. That afternoon we found it, tucked behind a fenced-in construction site within Willow Ridge. Half covered with a tarp like it was nothing but scrap. We didn't ask permission. Greg cut the lock, marched in, and reclaimed it. We have it all on tape. His badge, my voice, their faces frozen when they realized we weren't just standing up. We were fighting back. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning. A letter on my porch. No return address. No signature. Just 6 words printed in bold black ink. We warned you. This is war. And I believe them. Because men like Dale, and boards like Willow Ridges, they don't stop when they're wrong. They double down. They escalate. So if you're reading this, if you're a man who knows the value of land, the fight it takes to hold it, and the quiet strength required to say enough, then hear me. This isn't just my fight anymore. This is every fight against petty tyrants and paper soldiers who mistake ink for authority. They think we'll fold. They think we're too tired, too old, too alone. But they're wrong. We're still here. And we're just getting started. You'd think stealing a tractor would be the end of it. You'd think once a federal marshal shows up and a sheriff calls your actions criminal, a halfway sane group of people would pack it in, apologize, and count their blessings they're not behind bars. But sanity doesn't apply when the game is power and the players aren't held accountable. And out here, when you poke the wrong people, especially the ones trying to control land they never earned, you don't get peace. You get war dressed in silence. War waged at night. War in the form of shadows and signatures and sleepless damn mornings. The day we recovered the tractor was supposed to be a win. Greg drove it back himself, followed by 2 cruisers from the sheriff's office. I stayed behind to speak to a local news team, handed them the footage of the illegal tow attempt, showed them the unsigned notices, the fake visual compliance citations with 0 county oversight. The reporter, a young guy with camera gear too expensive for his age, shook his head and said, "This isn't just over a tractor, is it?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, son. This is over the right to exist without fear on land that's been in my family for 3 generations." That night, the segment ran on the 6 o'clock news, and my phone didn't stop ringing for hours. Neighbors from across the county called to say they'd seen the same vehicles, the same clipboard threats, the same tactics. Most had ignored them. A few had sold their land under pressure. One old rancher left me a voicemail that I'll never delete. His voice cracked like an old gate hinge. "Claire, don't let them win." They tried the same with my cousins spread up north. Now it's a golf course, and he lives in a trailer behind it. They want control. You fight like hell. And fight we did. But war comes in waves. And the next one hit just before dawn. The smell of burnt paint hit me before the sight of it. Red spray paint scrawled across my barn wall like a curse. "Sell or else" in slanted, angry letters. And beneath it, a dead chicken, one of mine, laid out carefully, its neck snapped clean. Not the work of a coyote. Not a mess. A message. Greg arrived 20 minutes later, jaw tight, eyes colder than usual. Leah, our lawyer, showed up with a camera and started documenting everything. She didn't speak at first. Just clicked photos, one after another, her expression set like stone. Maddie saw it from the upstairs window and started crying. I held her tight and whispered the kind of lie every parent tells in moments like this. "They're scared, honey. That's why they do this. People who are losing do things like this." But inside I was boiling. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was escalation. The kind that leads to fire. Or blood. Greg called the sheriff, and the report was filed, but we both knew there wouldn't be arrests. Not yet. Not without proof. So we shifted. From defense to offense. That morning we drove to the county office and requested every zoning map on record. Leah pulled every legal document tied to our parcel and cross-referenced it against the HOA's expansion filings. That's when we found it. A community development proposal submitted quietly 2 months earlier by the Willow Ridge HOA board, one that included our land inside a future residential expansion corridor. It didn't matter that we hadn't signed anything. Didn't matter that our land was zoned agricultural and outside their jurisdiction. They'd filed the paperwork like the decision was already made, like we were just a box to be checked later. Leah cursed out loud when she read it, and she never curses. They're banking on us not noticing until it's too late, she said. By the time the zoning board votes, construction would have started and fighting it would take years. I remember just staring at the document. My name wasn't even spelled right. They listed me as Clara, as if I didn't matter, as if I was a formality. That's when something inside me clicked. You know the feeling. The moment you stop hoping people will do the right thing and start preparing for what happens when they don't. We didn't wait. We filed a cease and desist letter and delivered it by hand. Leah drafted a formal challenge to the zoning board and sent certified notices to every HOA board member involved. Greg contacted a friend in the Department of Justice, someone from his old days who knew what patterns to look for. We planted cameras on every fence post, installed motion detectors, trail cams, even put a license plate reader at the end of the private road. And still that night, we weren't ready for what came next. Just after 2:30 a.m., the motion alarm triggered near the chicken coop. A lone figure moving low, flashlight off, creeping across the shadows like a ghost. I watched it on the screen from my bedroom, heart pounding, hands already dialing Greg in the guest room. But he was already up, halfway down the hallway with his boots in one hand and his pistol in the other. I saw it, he said. Stay inside. Lock the doors. The figure approached the barn. Then, from their jacket, they pulled a metal canister. Even from the screen, I could tell what it was. Gasoline. They uncapped it, raised it. Then the floodlights snapped on, blinding white from every corner of the property. An alarm shrieked across the ranch, loud enough to scare every dog for 3 miles. The figure dropped the can and ran, but they didn't make it far. Greg caught him near the far fence line, tackled him hard enough to rattle teeth. When the sheriff arrived, the kid, maybe 17, lanky and pale, kept saying the same thing. They paid me. I didn't know they were serious. Some guy with a clipboard said he'd give me $300 to send a message. Greg paced like a caged wolf while the deputy cuffed the kid. What message? He asked. The kid nodded toward the barn. The gasoline. The dead chicken. The words on the wall. That's when we knew. It wasn't about noise anymore. It was about destruction. About erasing us one act at a time. The next morning, we took it all public. Every photo, every video, every threat. Channel 5 ran the full story. Local ranch under siege by rogue HOA. We were no longer just victims. We were witnesses. And once the news aired, more voices came forward. An elderly couple said they were offered help with medical bills if they signed an easement. A church a few miles out had faced sudden inspections and permits getting denied after refusing to sell their land. The web spread wide and ugly. Then came the break. A courier named Jeremy Collins reached out to us anonymously. Said he'd been paid to deliver sealed envelopes from Willow Ridge HOA to county officials. He'd seen cash exchange hands in a grocery parking lot. He had photos. He was scared, but he agreed to speak on record. That was the nail in the coffin we needed. We gathered everything. Greg, Leah, myself. Spread the evidence across the kitchen table like we were preparing for battle. And that's exactly what we were doing. Because this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about what happens when people like Dale get used to power with no consequence. What happens when a committee thinks it can rewrite the rules to fit their expansion dreams. I looked out that morning across the field. The sun was rising, gold over the ridge. My barn still scarred with red paint, but standing. My tractor safe. My daughter asleep upstairs. And I thought of my husband, of how he used to say, "This land doesn't make you rich. It makes you right." He was right. This land is worth fighting for. Not because of what's built on it, but because of who it belongs to. And I'll be damned if I ever let anyone take it away without one hell of a fight. The day we stepped into the county zoning board chamber, I swear the air shifted. You could feel it. The quiet tension of a room full of people who thought they were about to watch a simple vote turn into a damn reckoning. The board sat stiff-backed behind polished oak, 7 of them lined up like weathered chess pieces. Some tried to look indifferent, a couple looked nervous, and one, an older man with a pen tapping against his coffee mug. Looked like he'd seen this coming for weeks, but had stayed silent anyway. Leah stood to my left, thumb drive in hand, blazer crisp, hair pulled back with the kind of precision that says, "I've come to win." Greg stood to my right, arms crossed, expression carved in stone. The room was packed. Locals, ranchers, reporters with cameras and clipboards. And near the back, like they always do, sat Dale and his cronies, the same clipboard mafia dressed up in ties today, whispering to their lawyer who looked about one missed call away from a stroke. The chairman cleared his throat. "We are here today to vote on the proposed annexation of Parcel 14B into the Willow Ridge HOA Community Development Expansion Plan." I took a slow breath, eyes scanning the crowd. Familiar faces nodded at me. Some I'd known for years, others I'd never met, but knew they stood behind me now because they saw what this was really about. Leah stepped forward. "Before any vote is taken, this body needs to see the evidence of coercion, fraud, and trespass associated with this proposal." She plugged in the drive. The screen behind the board lit up with video footage. Dale and his men walking onto my ranch uninvited, issuing fake violation notices, their SUV parked inches from my barn. Audio recordings played next, Dale's voice, flat and smug, threatening to tow my tractor, that final call where someone warned me, "This is war." Then came the photo, Jeremy's evidence. A county official in a parking lot, accepting a manila envelope from a Willow Ridge rep. It was clear. Undeniable. One of the board members muttered under his breath, "Jesus." The chairman leaned back slowly, his jaw tight. This is serious." Leah didn't flinch. "What's serious is the attempted land grab of a woman who never signed a single HOA agreement, whose property predates Willow Ridge by decades, and who was targeted, harassed, and nearly burned out of her land." Greg stepped forward. "This isn't zoning. This is racketeering." He turned, locking eyes with Dale. "You think a clipboard gives you dominion over this county? You think a tie and a printed form makes you king? You're not a leader. You're a parasite. You preyed on people too tired to fight and hoped no one would notice when you got greedy." Dale didn't say a word, didn't move, just sat there with his jaw clenched and his hands in his lap. The lawyer next to him slowly slid his briefcase under the table. The chairman spoke again. "What is your motion, counselor?" Leah didn't hesitate. Immediate termination of the annexation proposal, an independent ethics investigation into the Willow Ridge HOA board, and full protection of Claire Matthews' property rights against any future encroachment. The vote was unanimous. 7 hands in the air. And the room, it exploded. Applause. Cheering. People hugging, crying, stomping their boots. I stood there, hands shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of relief. The noose they tried to tie around my neck had snapped. 2 days later, the sheriff delivered the formal charges. Dale and 2 other Willow Ridge officers were being investigated for conspiracy, criminal trespass, and fraud. The planning official caught in the parking lot resigned quietly, and his office issued a full retraction of the development map that included my land. And just like that, the fortress they built on lies and paperwork started to crumble. But the fallout didn't stop there. That weekend, the entire valley came together. We hosted a barbecue under the big cottonwood trees behind the barn. Tables full of brisket, cornbread, pies that would make your knees buckle. Ranchers brought folding chairs. Kids ran through the field with flags made from old feed bags. One of the local churches brought a choir. And someone, I never did find out who, brought a hand-painted sign that read, "This land stands free." The sheriff showed up near sunset, handed me a framed certificate for outstanding civil courage in defense of landowner rights. I choked up trying to say thank you. I wasn't used to recognition. I was used to work, to grit, to doing what needed to be done because no one else would. Joey taped the sign above the barn door with Maddie's help. Greg stood beside me, his eyes scanning the horizon, never fully relaxing. That's the thing about men like him. They don't celebrate too long. They stay ready. And I was starting to understand why. Because just when I thought the war was over, Leah arrived with a manila folder. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was a stamped court order. Permanent protection from HOA annexation, Matthews Family Ranch. It was real, legal, binding. My land would never again be subject to their grasp. And yet, Greg's phone buzzed. He stepped away to answer, came back with that same edge in his jaw. "They found files in Dale's house," he said. "Maps, names, notes. Not just you. Small farms all over the county. Even a historic church was on their list. They weren't just targeting you. You were the test case. My stomach turned. How many others? Too many, he said. But now they've got a spotlight on them the size of Texas. DOJ's stepping in. This case just went federal. I closed my eyes for a second. Let the breeze wash over me. Let the smell of grilled corn and diesel and sun-dried hay remind me what we'd saved. It wasn't just a ranch. It was a stand. And we weren't alone anymore. We were a line in the sand for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't have a say on land they were born to. As the stars came out and the last of the neighbors trickled home, I stood at the back fence, hand resting on the old post James and I had set years ago. The wood was worn smooth by sun and storms. It had held the line through every season of our lives. Greg came up beside me, handed me a mug of coffee. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," I corrected. He nodded. Then, from the barn, came a low hum. The tractor, Joey behind the wheel, guiding it back into place like a soldier returning from war. And in that moment, everything settled. My home, my children, my land. It was still mine, still free. And the message to the Dales of this world couldn't have been louder if we'd carved it into the sky. Not here. Not now. Not ever. The wind that morning felt different. Not just cooler, but cleaner, like something heavy had finally lifted from the sky. The sun hadn't fully crested the ridge yet, but it painted the pasture in gold, and for the first time in weeks, I stepped outside without bracing for bad news. No strange vehicles at the gate, no threatening letters under the porch stone, no tire tracks sneaking in during the night. Just the soft hum of the windmill turning steady and the low grunt of Willow, our oldest cow, calling for breakfast. I stood on the porch a while longer than usual, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the light creep over the hills like a blessing. The barn looked strong again, repainted, secure. The chickens pecked the dirt without a hint of worry. The sign Joey and Maddie had helped plant at the end of the driveway stood tall. Private ranch. Not under HOA. No trespassing. But I knew better than to think peace came without a price. And I knew better than to assume the ones who'd started this war were done. Because people like Dale and the board he rode in with, they don't go away quietly. They circle back in different suits with new names on their letterhead and fresh smiles that hide the same sharp teeth. Greg joined me a few minutes later, phone in hand, face hard. "You're not going to like this," he said. I just sipped my coffee and waited. The city inspector showed up again. Dropped off a citation for unauthorized agricultural activity. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so damn predictable. "They're trying to bury us in paper now," I said. Greg nodded. "They've shifted tactics. No more trucks. No more threats. They're playing the long game. Board votes, county hearings, technicalities buried in subclauses. If they can't scare you out, they'll bore you out. Fine you into the ground until the ranch bleeds dry." That hit harder than I expected, because I've seen that happen before. Ranchers I knew, strong men with strong backs, buried under fees, citations, court dates, until they sold just to breathe again. It doesn't take fire to ruin a place. Sometimes it just takes ink. Leah arrived not long after, already flipping through a fresh folder of documents. "They filed for a review of your property line," she said, "no greeting, just business. They're claiming part of your northern field overlaps with an unincorporated expansion zone." "It doesn't," I said. She nodded. "I know. The original deed is clear. But they're betting you can't fight 3 hearings, hire 2 surveyors, and pay a private consultant to counter their claim." I leaned against the railing and stared out toward the north fence. That land had been ours since before Willow Ridge was a whisper in a contractor's blueprint. My daddy cleared that field with nothing but a chainsaw and a borrowed mule. And now they wanted to rewrite history with a ruler and a vote. "We stop them before it reaches the board," Leah said. "We dig. We expose. We don't wait this time." Greg was already dialing. "I'll talk to Thompson at the sheriff's office. We need to know who's backing this push. Who's whispering behind closed doors." That night, we didn't sleep. We turned the kitchen into a command center. Maps, legal files, zoning drafts, names, dates. Greg reached out to old contacts in the state's land office. Leah traced the HOA's filings and found a pattern. Multiple properties targeted, each with water access, buildable acreage, or strategic location next to main roads. This wasn't just about me. It was a full-on scheme. A land seizure operation wrapped in legal clothing. By sunrise, we had more than a case. We had a mission. I spent the next 2 days knocking on doors, neighbors, fellow ranchers, retirees with small plots, even a single mom who ran a horse therapy nonprofit for disabled kids. Almost all had received offers. Some had signed under pressure. Others were too scared to speak. But a few had stories like mine. One man, widowed Vietnam vet, said his back pasture was suddenly flagged for environmental risk after he refused to sell. Another woman had county inspectors show up 4 times in 1 week for safety checks. None of it was coincidence. All of it pointed back to the same circle. Willow Ridge. Same names. Same handshakes behind planning doors. And then came Jeremy. Again. This time with a thumb drive full of emails he'd secretly copied during his courier shifts. Internal memos between HOA board members, notes to certain county officials, even one line that chilled me. If Matthews folds, the rest will follow. That was it. That was their plan. I was the first domino. And now I wasn't just defending my ranch. I was holding the line for every person they planned to steamroll after me. Leah took the evidence straight to the district attorney. Greg handed copies to the DOJ contact who'd been watching from a distance. And I called every reporter who had covered our case and told them to get ready. Because the next zoning board meeting wasn't going to be quiet. That night, I stood in the barn. The lights were off, but the moon was strong, casting long silver beams across the hay bales. I could still smell the faint echo of spray paint, even though we'd scrubbed it off weeks ago. The dead chicken was gone, buried under a shade tree with a small stone Maddie painted. She named the new hen Victory. I smiled thinking of it, not because I felt victorious, but because sometimes the names we give things carry the hope we need to get through another day. The morning of the meeting, we arrived early. The boardroom was full before the gavel even dropped. Ranchers with weathered hands, mothers with young kids, older couples with thick file folders clutched like shields. Dale was nowhere in sight. His replacement, a slick-looking man in a navy suit with perfect teeth and a plastic smile, sat at the end of the HOA table. Leah called him out by name. Before this board considers any zoning adjustment or expansion vote, you need to see what's really going on. She played Jeremy's files, the emails, the memos, the money trails, the manipulation. Then she showed them the list. The names of every property marked for future review. One board member, a woman who hadn't spoken much before, suddenly stood. My father's land is on that list. Her voice shook. You targeted him. The vote was delayed, then frozen, then canceled outright. A special ethics investigation was launched into the HOA. And I watched it all from the back of the room, arms crossed, heart steady. After the session, a woman I didn't know approached me. She wore a simple dress and had calloused hands like mine. You saved my farm, she whispered. I didn't even know I was in danger. That night, we sat on the porch again. Same breeze, same stars, but something deeper in the air. Peace, maybe, or pride, or the knowledge that the line we drew in the dirt was now drawn in law, in headlines, in the memory of every person who stood beside us. Greg raised his coffee. To land that fights back. I raised mine. To people who don't give up. And inside the barn, under the warm glow of a hanging bulb, Joey tuned up the tractor, his hands already calloused like his daddy's once were. We hadn't just protected a ranch. We'd protected a way of life. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't just surviving. I was standing tall, unbroken, unbought, and absolutely unafraid.